I lied to a friend. It was not a large lie. Nobody was hurt. No money moved. If you had been standing there, you would not have even noticed anything at all. We were sitting together, and she was telling me about a conversation she had had with an anti racism expert. As she recounted what the expert said, she was troubled. The conclusions were built on assumptions. The assumptions were built on stereotypes. She worked through it out loud the way you do when you trust the other person. And I nodded, and I used small facial muscles to construct the look of shock. I uttered the small sound of agreement. I performed a person who was tracking every turn. I was not tracking. I did not hear what was wrong. I couldn't have told you which part of what the expert said was the broken part. I had no idea. My brain did not make the connection, so I acted like I did. My response is the whole episode. There was nothing at stake. She was my friend. She was not testing me. She had come to me precisely because she wanted a thinking partner, not a performance. The room was safe. The cost of saying, I am not hearing it, walk me through it, was zero. I paid a higher price instead, and I lied. On the drive home, it caught up with me. Not the lie first, the arrogance at first. Why in the world would I believe I am immune to blind spots? How exactly do I plan to learn anything if I dodge the truth on the way in? We met again. I asked her to forgive me for lying. She did, graciously, and then she was ready to talk. This time I listened. This time I learned. This time I asked. I think about that afternoon often, and I realize I did not lie to protect her. I did not lie to win an argument. I lied because I could not stand to be seen not knowing. There is a word I could have said that would have cost me nothing and bought me everything. We'll get to it, so stay with me. Here's what I want to establish before we go anywhere near research. Most sidestep, I don't know. Not out loud, not as a complete sentence with a period at the end. What we say instead is a family of small, fluent, forgettable things. You know all of them because you have either witnessed or used them all. There is the half answer. We give the part we do have and let the shape of it imply the rest. Nobody follows up, so it works. There's the pivot. Someone asks about a thing we don't know, and we answer about the adjacent thing we do know. This one is a specialty of the well-read. It's also a specialty of the well-credentialed, because the more we are supposed to know, the more expensive it becomes to admit there is a gap. There is the hedge that sounds like knowledge. It's complicated. There are a lot of factors. It depends on what you mean. Each of these is a real sentence in the right context. Each of them is also a place to hide. There's the nod, my nod, the face doing the work the mind can't. And now there's a new one, the newest one. We reach for the phone. The phone is not the villain. What the phone does is remove the last inch of friction between not knowing and appearing to know. Faking it used to require some skill. Now it requires a thumb. I have gotten very good at never being caught. And in getting good at that, I've gotten out of practice at what actually moves me forward. Because here's the trouble with all those evasions. Every one of them ends the inquiry. The half answer ends it. The pivot ends it. The hedge ends it. My nod ended it. And it ended it for both of us, because my friend walked away from that afternoon with less than she came for, and from the promise I had made sitting across from her. The one response that does not end is the one we will not say. Now, I want to tell you about a piece of research that came out this summer, because it took something I believed and put a number to it. A team of researchers in Italy ran an experiment. The setup is simple enough to describe in a minute, and I want to walk you through the design first before I tell you about what happened. They asked people obscure questions about films, not trivia you would know, genuinely difficult, specific, out-of-the-way questions. The first important part is that the participants could always decline. At any point, they could simply say they did not know. That was a permitted, ordinary, fully available response. No penalty for it, nothing lost. Here's the second important part. There was a penalty for guessing wrong. Actual money on the line. Get it wrong, and you pay. So, think about the incentives at play here. If you know, answer and win. If you don't know, say so and lose nothing. Guess and be wrong and you pay. A child could even work out the optimal strategy. Say, I don't know, whenever you didn't know. Then they added the variable. Some participants had access to AI advice. And on these obscure film questions, the AI was usually wrong. I predicted people would lean on the AI to be a bit overconfident and lose some money. That is the boring version. And it is what most of the coverage will say. That's not what happened. What happened is stranger and a little more interesting. Across every version of the experiment, having access to AI advice nearly eliminated people's willingness to say they did not know. Not reduced, nearly eliminated. Pause with that for a second. Does that ring true for how you might respond? These people were being paid to admit ignorance. What they were handed was usually wrong. They took the wrong thing and they abandoned the free, safe, correct move. So what exactly got suppressed? It was not their accuracy. Accuracy was already low. That is what obscure means. It was not their self-interest. They were acting against it. What got suppressed was their willingness to be seen, not knowing. That is the only thing left after the other explanations are cleared away. So, for those of us who like to play in the question space, recognize that AI did not create that reflex. The AI did not teach us to hide. We came preloaded. What the AI did was hand us cover, and we took it, even when it cost us money. Which brings me back to my friend's living room. There was no machine in that room. No researchers, no penalty, no reward. However, there was a man who could not stand to be seen, not knowing, and a nod. The technology did not invent this. It industrialized it. So let me offer a helpful refrain. We treat I don't know as a report, as a status update on the inventory. You ask me for a thing, I check the shelves, and we're out. Sorry. If it is a report, then of course we hate saying it. Reports of emptiness are humiliating. Nobody wants to be the shop with bare shelves. But that is not what it is. I don't know is a doorway. It's the only doorway. It's the single move that opens into a real question, and there's no other way in. Look at the alternatives and you'll see it immediately. An answer you accepted closes the door. Once you have it, you are done. There's nothing to walk towards. The thing is settled, and the settled things do not generate questions. An answer you never sought never built a door in the first place. You cannot open what does not exist. Only the honest gap has a doorway in it. Only the place where you can say, I do not have this, gives you somewhere to go. Which means that all those evasions we listed earlier are not just small social lies. They are structural. Every one of them is a door bricked over. The half answer bricks it. The pivot bricks it. My nod bricked it. And what makes this urgent rather than merely interesting, the doorway has a shelf life. When you don't know something, there is a window where the not knowing is alive. It itches. There's a small physical charge to it. It pulls at you. That's the state where a question can form and mature into something worth asking. And the window is short. Fill it fast enough, and the itch never gets a chance to become anything. We've built a world that fills it in under a second. This is not about abandoning the tools. I am asking whether we have noticed that the gap between question and answer is where all the interesting things used to happen, and that we have very nearly closed it. I want to step out of the theoretical because I did not learn it from a study. I learned it standing on a sidewalk with nothing useful to say. As we've discussed before, I've spent 24 months walking every street and alley in Washington, D.C., wearing a large yellow sandwich board. I had a lot of conversations. Most were kind, some were not, and a few rearranged me. One Sunday in March, I crossed the Anacostia River for the first time. Up to that point, I had walked the northern tip of the city and the very white neighborhoods west of Rock Creek Park. Now I was in a predominantly black community, and I was about to find out what my walking project looked like from the other side of it. The first thing anyone said to me that day was this: "Everyone here already knows about that. Go convince your people." That was the morning. The evening was harder. Near the end of the day, a woman stopped me and asked me 5 questions. She asked them like she had been waiting a long time for someone who looked like me to stand in front of her for the inquiry to land. "Are you racist? What real difference are you making? What do you think about white supremacy? Why is it okay for you to walk our neighborhood when I cannot safely walk yours? Do you know how tired we are of dealing with this?" Now, I want you to notice what I had available to me because I had had a lot of material. I had read the books. I had been walking for over 10 months. I had hundreds of conversations behind me. I had a map with a great deal of purple tracing the miles walked. I had a small collection of things I could have said that would have sounded pretty good. Every one of them would have essentially been a nod. What I actually had was nothing. No snappy answer, not to any of the 5. I was simply out of material. The only thing to my credit is that I did not manufacture any. I told her that I did not have an answer for her, and that I was not going to back away from the work. That was it. That was the whole exchange. There was no embrace. She didn't thank me. I did not get a warm ending to put in a post. Here's what happened instead. Those 5 questions followed me home, and they've stayed. They made me think deeply about what this project could actually accomplish. I had been walking for 10 months on an assumption I had never fully examined, that presence is worth something. She asked me to show my work, and I couldn't. Because I couldn't, I had to go build a better answer over the next 14 months. Every question she asked was justified, all 5. I understood the optics of a white man with a sign about social justice, and I understood that performative activism is a real category and that I might be in it. And I want to say on the mechanism, because the mechanism is the point. If I had produced an answer that afternoon, the whole thing would have ended right there on the sidewalk. She would have gotten a performance, and I would have gotten to keep my assumption. Instead, I got many months of focused work. The not knowing is what kept the question alive long enough to change me. More than 5 years later, they continued to demand answers. Now I want to provide some good news, because we are not all about doom and gloom around here. Research delivered a second finding that offers hope through action. In work on AI-generated health misinformation, researchers found that intellectual humility acted as a protective filter. People who scored higher on intellectual humility, meaning the ordinary awareness that their own knowledge has limits, rated pseudoscience content as less credible. So in plain terms, that means the capacity holds. When you know that you do not know everything, you become harder to fool, not because you're smarter, but because you're checking. The person who is certain has no reason to check. The person who has made peace with their own gaps checks by reflex, and that checking catches the nonsense. So this is not a story about an inevitable slide. It's a story about a muscle. Muscles atrophy when we stop using them, and we have built a world with an elevator next to every staircase. but muscles also respond quickly and gratifyingly to being used again. This one is available today. It costs nothing, and thankfully, I don't need to buy anything, download anything, or sign up for anything. I just have to be willing to be seen not knowing, on purpose, in public, at least once. Which brings us to the word. I had a conversation on this podcast with David Pearl, and he told me about the question that has organized his entire life. It is one word. Really? He traces it back to childhood. He describes the sense a kid can have that there are things that he is being told that aren't so, and things that are so that he isn't being told. That gap, that sense of a story not quite matching the room, produced a single word in him, and it never left. He said it might even belong on his gravestone. There is some subtlety worth noting, because it is easy to hear it as sarcasm, and it's not. He's not challenging everything about the speaker. He's testing whether the thing in front of him is real. He gave me an example that carries the idea. Imagine someone comes into you in pieces. Their relationship is ended. They say, "I will never love again." You have two options. You can comfort them. They're there. It'll be all right. Or you can do what a certain kind of grandmother does. You can take one word out of their sentence and hand it back. Never? And watch what happens. They stop, they hear it, they say, "Well, no, not never." And now they are working. Now they are figuring it out themselves. And whatever they arrive at belongs to them in a way that nothing you told them ever could. That's the move. One word, an upturn in the tone, and a verdict with an airtight seal is now reopened to possibility. With that working definition, we can expand the concept beyond how to win arguments. David mostly aims, really? Outward, at organizations, at consensus reality, at the person in the business suit who has built things a particular way for 30 years and has stopped noticing that he chose to. I want you to name it inward, because the sealed thing is not always someone else's certainty. Very often, it's my own. The claim I just made, the opinion I have held so long I have forgotten where I adopted it from. The answer I accepted at 9:14 this morning from a machine and have not thought about since. Really? Do I actually know that? Or do I know that I read it? Or do I know that it sounds like the kind of thing that is true? An AI answer is the most sealed object in our day. It arrives finished, it's fluent, complete, with no ragged edge anywhere, and finished things do not invite questions. That is why those research participants stopped saying, "I don't know." They were not handed information. They were handed the appearance of a closed matter, and you do not knock on a door that's been painted over. One word scores the paint and reopens it. I owe you the end of a story. Go back to that living room. My friend is talking. I'm nodding. The word I needed that afternoon was not a word for her. It was not, "Really?" aimed at what she said. It was, "Really?" aimed at me. "Really, Ken? Do you actually hear what is wrong here?" That's it, all it would have taken. One word turned inward, and I would have had to answer myself honestly. And once I had answered myself honestly, the three words would have been the only thing left to say out loud. I don't know. It would have cost me nothing. I'm not going to pretend I've mastered this. I have a note to myself from the walk written on a Wednesday in the Navy Yard neighborhood after 3 men asked me about white lives. I answered them. I gave them a decent answer. And what I wrote that night was that I had fallen into the trap of answering instead of responding with a question, and that I was still working to get better at it. That was years ago. I'm still working at it. That's how practice works. But I've started to think this deserves a name. because the thing has no name and unnamed things are hard to practice. What I'm describing is the deliberate refusal to accept the first answer, not rejection, not skepticism as a personality, just the decision to leave the question open a little longer than is comfortable and to say out loud that you do not know. I've been circling two potential candidates. One is answer stay, the other is cognitive stay. A stay in like the legal sense, an intentional pause in the proceedings, ordered rather than accidental. I'm not going to settle it here. I'd rather you help me. Write me. Tell me what you would call it. Because if there's one thing I have learned from 1,300 conversations, it's that the good words come from the street and not necessarily from the desk. So let me share with you what the I don't know doorway actually opens onto, because I've spent time on the other side. On a Saturday in July, I was walking the Marshall Heights neighborhood. A man called Raymond invited me into his backyard to talk. I had planned for a 20-minute lunch break. I had miles to cover and a schedule in my head. We started at 1 o'clock. We finished at 6:45 p.m. At 61 years, Raymond had never talked to a white person about race. And in 5 hours and 45 minutes, there was not a break in the conversation. His wife came and went. A rain squall passed over us. Premature Independence Day fireworks started popping off somewhere in the neighborhood. We kept going. Here's what I wrote in my notes that night. For not walking, we covered a lot of ground. And then this. I have much to consider. That's it. That is the whole conclusion. 5 hours and 45 minutes, and the honest close is that I was still thinking about it. Nothing was resolved. No position was reached. I did not walk out of that yard with a summary, and I probably would not have trusted one if I had. That is what's on the other side of the doorway. Not answers, more questions, better shaped. The thing I was wondering about at 1 o'clock has grown up by 6:45 into something I could not have asked in the morning. We've been trained to see that as a failure. 5 hours? No deliverable? Most bosses would be leery of a list of questions as a complete set of meeting minutes. I will say that my time with Raymond was one of my most valuable afternoons of a 2-year project. And the machine on your desk cannot deliver in the same way. Not because the machine is bad, because what happened in that yard required two people who did not know staying in the not knowing together, long past the point of comfort. The whole value was in the duration. There's no version of that afternoon that runs in 4 seconds. All right, so let's figure out a way to land this plane. We are living through a moment where the distance between a question and an answer has collapsed to almost nothing. That is a real gift. I don't want to abandon it. But something is living in that space, and it is the thing that makes us worth talking to. Not our answers, our willingness to not have one yet. The research says we are losing the willingness to say these words, and that we are losing it even when we are paid to keep it. That should get our attention. But research describes a pattern. It's not a declaration. You and me get to decide what we do this week. So here is what I would ask of you. Once this week, in front of another human being, say the words, not as a dodge, not with a, but here's what I think, chasing it out the door. Say it and let it sit there. Notice what it costs you, and my guess is less than you fear. Then notice what happens next, because something will. The other person will lean in, or they will tell you something they were not going to tell you. Or you will find yourself asking a question you did not have 30 seconds earlier. That is the door swinging. And when the certainty is your own, when you catch yourself holding an answer you cannot trace, try the one word. Really? I mean, wobble the jelly a little. See if the thing is real. I lied to a friend because I could not stand to be seen not knowing. It cost me an afternoon of learning I will never get back, and it cost her a thinking partner she had come looking for. That's what the evasion buys. Nothing at a very high price. So, I'll leave you where I always leave you, with a question. What do you currently pretend to know? because you believe not knowing it would cost you something. Sit with it and do not answer it fast. Keep questioning.